Thank you, Jane, for a wonderful wide awake talk. Um, yeah, you're correct. Enlightenment is really not a very good word. It has carries a lot of baggage with it, and the real translation is exactly awake. That's what Bodhi means. That's what Buddha means. Buddha means one who is awake, and Bodhi means being awake. So thank you very much for your wonderful talk. Are there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Forgive me. Yeah, a term a negative term about awakeness is being used quite a bit by politicians these days called wokeness. Would you please comment on that?
Don't pay attention to politicians. Yeah, so like liberal used to be a really good thing, and then it turned into like it didn't mean what it means now. Who knows what it means? But and now it's in some eyes it's a bad thing. And conservative used to mean something, and now it means something else. And don't pay attention to politicians. This is just like propaganda. It's just people trying to gain power and hold on to power. And I'm always wondering about that. There was a thing that crossed my Facebook feed that somebody put in a comment about how they've been asked to be in the Trump Forever Club. And this is not a comment on Donald Trump. This is a comment on human beings. Like, no human being lives forever. The universe doesn't live forever. Our planet doesn't live forever. Like, what does this mean? And people act like they're going to be forever and they're going to, like, run this country or that country or this institution or that institution or this household or that household. I mean, from the, forever. And no, people, you're going to die. And, you know, you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind that you're going to die and everybody's going to die and nobody lives forever and you can't hold on to power forever. And so if you have some kind of authority or power, the best thing you can do is think of how you can pass it on, not try to hold it yourself. So yeah, so this has nothing to do with what we're talking about here with Bodhi or Buddha or whatever. It has to do with people trying to gain power and hold power and never let go of power. And guess what? You're going to let go of everything someday. Everything. You look around you, you're not going to have anything like that. You look at yourself right now in the screen, that's going to be gone. And we have to live with that realization and the realization that we fit into this very big picture that we can't fully see and that we don't control. And we have to live our lives with that realization. So, yeah, don't pay attention to any of that. I mean, we have to because, we live in this world and we want to, have some kind of effect on this world and we don't like the way certain things are going on. So we want to divert them into other directions, but it's never about controlling things forever. If you think it's about controlling things forever, that's just such a huge mistake because you can't do it and nobody can do it. And if you want to be part of the Trump Forever Club or there's no Biden Forever Club, but if there was, or the, whatever Forever Club, I don't know, who's the guy in France, I'm forgetting his name, Him Forever Club, or, you know, you can't. It's crazy. So, yeah, thank you. End of rant.
Thank you. I feel better now.
I have a comment. It's not real. It's not a question at all, but it's a comment that it's burning in me. I mean, I really want to say this. So,
Okay.
I turned in late. I tuned in at 11:08. So I missed most of what Jane said. But when I turned on, she said, it's a gift to go back to our breaths. This is the first thing I heard her say, to go back to our breaths and go back to our mantra or whatever is a gift. And that like struck me. It has been striking. It strikes me in my chest so deeply, like that's the best thing I ever heard. It sounds like, wow, thank you for saying this. It's like, wow, it is a gift. I hadn't connected those two ideas before of returning to my breath and it being a gift. So thank you, Jane. That's all I wanted to say.
And thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. So I want to bring up a quote. I never do that, but this thing crossed my Facebook feed today, and it was so terrific that I have to actually quote it crossed it yesterday, that I have to bring it up. And I just was the reason I was late is because I was giving a Dharma talk at Providence Zen Center. It's an amazing world. I give a Dharma talk at Providence Zen Center at, what time was it? 9:45 or 10 o'clock, Central Time, and then at 10:45, I, come into, Kansas Zen Center. No airplanes involved. Anyway, this was posted by someone named Bikuni Tin Kwang. So, but it's a quote from a Tibetan teacher, Dzongkhar Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, and it's just so great I have to quote it. The aim of far too many teachings these days is to make people feel good, and even some Buddhist masters are beginning to sound like New Age apostles. Their talks are entirely devoted to validating the manifestation of ego and endorsing the rightness of our feelings, neither of which have anything to do with the teachings we find in the Pith instructions. So if you are only concerned about feeling good, you are far better off having a full body massage or listening to some uplifting or life affirming music than receiving Dharma teachers, which were definitely not designed to cheer you up. On the contrary, the Dharma was devised specifically to expose your failings and make you feel awful. Isn't that great? Yeah. I just love that. And of course, that's entirely congruent with everything that Jane said, and it's entirely congruent with what Carol said about what Jane said. Yeah, make us feel awful so we'll wake up. We won't live in our dream. You gotta look at the crap and you gotta say, oh my God, that's really crappy before you can cut through the crap. So yeah, that's what it's designed. Zen Master Sung San said, you want to feel good? Go to the movies. So it's not about feeling good. And Jane gave this wonderful story about it's not about me. It's about listening. It's about paying attention. It's about being completely open, which means being completely open to how crappy we are, completely open to how crappy other things are, completely open without trying to stop, you know, without trying to retreat into our little hidey hole. So I just had to say that. I just love that. Anyway, anybody have any other questions?
Hello, Judy. I have a question. This is Haris.
Hi, Harris. How are you?
I'm great.
Where are you these days?
What time?
Where are you?
I'm in Czech Republic right now.
Okay. All right.
I'm still here. So, you said you wrote this quote. It says that Dharma is not designed to make you happy and to put all these crappy things on the surface. But actually, and make us awake. Actually, isn't this the greatest joy of all? What is more satisfying than that? I mean, we can watch a movie, okay, or have some other fun, but is there something greater than that? That's my question.
Yeah. So the Dharma. So wake up. If you're really awake, you don't care whether you're happy or whether you're sad. You don't care whether you're bored or whether you're really absorbed in something. If you're really awake, you just do it. Whatever it is that is there for you to do, you just do it. That's all. And it's not about your feelings. Your feelings come and your feelings go. Happiness comes, happiness goes. It's not about that. It's not for me. When Siho Yao, who later became Zen Master Subang, when Si Liao was first practicing, and he wrote to Zen Master Sung San, and he said, "What is the fast road to Zen?" He wrote it on a little postcard. That's why I made this little gesture. And Zen Master Sung San sent back a postcard and said, "Not for me." And that doesn't mean, oh, it's not for me, somebody else can do it. It means it's not about you. It's not about, if we are practicing, it's not about that person who is practicing. It's about becoming completely open and completely awake and aware and alive. And so feelings are not, they're the weather, you know? They're the weather. They come and they go. Right now there's snow on the ground. And because we're in Kansas, in a few days it's going to be 40 degrees. And if it stays 40 degrees for a few more days, no more snow on the ground. And then there'll be more snow on the ground. And because we're Kansas and we're sort of on the cusp of north and south, when the jet stream is below us, you know, that brings in the cold air. When the jet stream is above us, it brings in the hot air. And it just keeps going back and forth. So snow, no snow, snow, no snow. That's our feelings. So yeah, everything feels wonderful. And maybe 5 minutes later, everything feels horrible. That's not important. What's important is wake up. Wake up in this moment. What is there to do right now? That's what's important. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, sometimes when we are 100% focused on doing something, whatever that thing is, there is this under realization or understanding that there is no inside, no outside. There's no object or subject. I'm just being one with what I do, which is good, which feels good. But the thing sometimes make me thinking is, when do we use this focus as a type of meditation? But sometimes this focus could be a distraction. So we're actually using a focus as a distraction. So okay, it could go two ways. So I was just wondering, what's your thoughts on that? It's just my personal feeling about what I do with this focus from time to time.
Yeah, you're not alone. So when we think, oh, inside and outside become one, in that moment they become separate because we have an idea, you know? So be very, very careful. There's this saying, even with one hair's breadth, heaven and earth become separate. And then the response is, even with no hair's breadth, heaven and earth become separate. So the minute we say, this is so wonderful, everything is one, there is no inside, no outside, no subject, no object, that's already thinking it's gone. So that's the first thing. You know, before speech really means before speech. It doesn't mean after speech. And then, so what you said about concentration is very interesting. If we say, I am so concentrated, then already you're right, we're not concentrated. But our practice in Zen practice, now there are many meditation practices, but all Zen practices have the same property, which is they're very boring. Maybe you're counting your breaths, you know, from 1 to 10 or, you know, 1 to 6 or whatever. Maybe you're counting your breaths. Maybe you're saying a mantra. Maybe you're going, what am I? Don't know. Maybe you're going, what am I? There's cognitively, there's nothing to grab in any of this. All the little entertaining things, you know, that we do to distract ourselves and keep ourselves focused. Those are gone. Just, over and over. On the in-breath, what am I? On the out-breath, don't know. And really paying attention to that. But it's not interesting. It doesn't flash lots of colors, make pretty sounds. It's not beautiful to look at. It's not ugly to look at. It's just on the in-breath, what am I? On the out-breath, don't know. Or counting our breaths, 1, 2, 3, 4, or counting our breaths. So that's very interesting that Zen practice is so boring. So when I first started practicing, I was practicing at Cambridge Zen Center, and now it's a beautiful complex of buildings in central Cambridge. But at that time, it was this town called Alston, right near Cambridge, across the river, and there was I was in a sort of funky little house, 2 stories, and the dorm room was on the ground floor, and the land kind of fell away. So it was kind of like if you live in a house with a walkout basement, there's one side that's really the ground floor, but it looks like it's the second floor. So that's what the dorm room was like. It was the ground floor, but if you looked out the windows, you would think you were on the second floor. And every Wednesday, they would have 2 rounds of sitting. The other nights were 1 round, but Wednesday was 2 rounds of sitting. And I would always stay for the second round, and I was the only one who would. Everyone else would leave except the poor head Dharma teacher. So they'd see me coming in and they'd think, oh God, I'm going to have to stay for both rounds of sitting because Judy's going to stay. So I would sit there, and I'd always sit in front of a window. And I would start getting really bored. That's why I stayed, because I knew I had to deal with being bored, And I would stay, and I get so bored. I'd want to scream from boredom. And it's interesting. I wouldn't think, oh, I can just get up and walk out the door. I would think, I could get up and smash the window and jump out the window, which is kind of crazy. But this boredom was so strong, so strong. So our practice is really boring. There's nothing to grab onto. There are no little handles, that we can grab to keep it interesting. And there's a reason for that. And that's why it's exactly as you say, when I become absorbed in playing the piano, if I become absorbed in photography, if I become absorbed in, doing the puzzle in the New York Times or doing Wordle or whatever, if I become absorbed in cooking, if I become absorbed in, hanging out with my husband or my friends or whatever, if I become absorbed in something, then in some sense that becomes a kind of distraction in itself. You become really absorbed in an activity, and your kid shows up, Mommy, I need you. Shut up, kid, I'm doing this, right? So that kind of absorption can become a distraction in its own way. So completely, like Jane said, completely awake, completely open. It's a different kind of absorption. Then boring comes no problem. Not boring comes no problem. Like I said to Harris, happiness comes no problem. Sadness comes no problem. Anything comes no problem. Just this, aliveness, this completely alive. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I got time for a short question if there is one.
I don't know if this is a short question, but
Okay.
you were talking about, the happy and that's not the point of Zen and all that. But, when I watched the videos on YouTube of Zen Master Sosong, he always seems to be very jovial, very happy, very, he jokes, his Dharma talks are full of jokes. And so of course, and I didn't know the man, so I didn't see him in all different categories or different settings, different situations. But it seems then that that's misleading, because then you watch it and you think, oh gee, I want to be like that. He's always happy, he never seems to be sad, he never seems to be upset. everything always, he just takes everything in stride, even going to the doctor, and because your heart rate is so low, and everything is just, well, I'll just go. And everybody else is worried, but he doesn't seem to be worried about it. So I mean, it just seems to be a misrepresentation then of what you're saying, because he's always happy. He
He's
always
always
seems to be
alive.
happy.
He was always alive. And he had a very strong center. So, yeah, when he almost died of heart failure in Europe, it was okay. Die, not die, no problem. But it's not like, later maybe he might make a joke about it. But in the moment, it's, oh, die, no, not die, no problem. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do, you know? So he was very alive. And when he was teaching, he was 100% teaching. So he wasn't going to tell you that his ankle hurt when he was teaching, because that wouldn't help you, you know. If it would, then he would tell you. So when he was teaching, he was teaching. It was very interesting because towards the end of his life, I remember he would, we couldn't put him on the program for things at Providence Zen Center because you weren't sure that he would be healthy enough. So what would happen is someone would get up, and the announcer would get up and say, and now we have a special treat. And then he would get up and do whatever he was doing. And when he was doing it, he was completely alive. And then afterwards, he would just sort of collapse very visibly. You could just see in his whole posture, you could see the effort that it had taken him. And then he would just sort of collapse there. And then towards the very end, the guy would get up and say, now we have a special treat. And you'd see him go like that. He didn't have it in him. So whatever was called for, that's what he would bring, as long as he could. And when he couldn't, he didn't. So I don't know if you think that's false representation or not. But, his style was not to talk about himself. My style, I talk about myself a lot. When I was first practicing at Cambridge Zen Center, I had this therapist, I had this friend, I talk about myself a lot as a teacher of Zen. But he never talked about himself. It just wasn't his style. But he was completely alive. But it wasn't happy, ha ha. It wasn't that kind of happiness. It was just completely alive and completely centered. So that's what it was. So yeah. Yeah, he was the first person to tell you, you wanna have a good time, go to the movies. But this was not about having a good time. So okay? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
But yeah, his sense of humor did certainly brought people in. It was good public relations to have this sense of humor. And of course, jokes are like koans. I mean, jokes are a very good way to get a point across without being theoretical about it, without doing it in the frontal lobes. So we had lots of jokes and lots of stories, because that's a good way to get the teachings across. So thank you. And let's see, I guess now it's time for announcements. We have in 2 weeks